In today's video, we're going to be using Adobe Photoshop to create this flyer for a cafe who is advertising breakfast. Now, while it looks like there's a lot going on in this flyer, and there is, it's actually quite simple to create. There's a lot of little techniques that go into this, so it is time consuming, yes, but the complexity of it is quite simple. Okay, so let's get started today by heading up to the File menu and selecting a new file. From the new document dialog box that appears, I want you to go over to the print option here and choose the A4 preset. That will set up a few sizes over here for you. So you should just double check and make sure you've got 210 millimeters for the width, 297 mils for the height, 300 pixels per inch resolution, which means it's in high quality, ready to be printed. And the color mode, we're going to have to change it from RGB color. RGB color is used when we're displaying documents on a computer screen. But because we want to print this stuff, we want to change it to CMYK color mode. Background contents can stay as white, so we'll click on create and we'll get an empty white canvas ready for us to create our flyer. Now the first thing I want to start with today is creating a background for our flyer. So over in our layers panel, we've got a layer called background. I want you to unlock it by hitting that little padlock on the end there. Okay, next thing I need you to do is double click in this empty space out here next to the words layer 0. And when you double click there, it brings up your layer style dialog box. I want you to go towards the bottom and select gradient overlay. And we're going to get a gradient overlay that looks just like this now. My settings have been previously set, so you just need to make sure you get yours the same. So our blend mode at the top needs to be set to normal. The opacity needs to be 100%. The gradient color is basically two dark grays. The way we select the colors for this gradient, which is two colors blending into one another, is we click these little squares down here that look like little padlocks. So click the first little padlock over here on the left and go down to the bottom that says color and select the dark gray. I chose one with the hexadecimal value 1A, 1A, 1A. Click OK. Then pop over to the right hand side and hit the little padlock on the right hand side. Now go and select a slightly darker grey. Okay, it's not quite black, but still very dark. And my hexadecimal code is 0A0A0A. So I'll click OK, and we've now got our gradient colour set. The style needs to be changed from linear to radial. Radial gradients go in a circle shape, so we're going to have a slightly lighter grey in the middle, and it will fade out to a darker grey towards the edges. The angle needs to be 90 degrees and the scale should be 125%. Once you've got all those settings done, click OK and you'll have a gradient background looking like mine. Alright, next thing we need to do with our layer over here that says layer 0 is just right click on it and we're going to convert it to a smart object so we can apply some filters to it. So convert it to a smart object. Before we go any further, I just want you to double click on layer 0 there and give it the name dark background. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to head up to the filter menu now at the top and choose noise, and we're going to add some noise to our background. If you don't know what noise is, it's basically little speckles that appear on your background. If I turn the amount up here, you'll see what I mean by the little speckles. Okay, we obviously don't want it to look like that because it looks a bit daggy, so I'm going to leave my amount at 4% and the distribution will be uniform. Click OK once you put that on. Okay, the last thing I want to do for this background is put a crumpled paper texture on it. Okay, so in your account you should have all these different assets. Okay, we're going to be using all these to make our flyer, and there's the crumpled paper. So you can either drag that over to Photoshop and drop it in there, or you can go to File and Place Embedded. And just go into your account and find that crumpled paper, File, and click Place. It comes in a little bit smaller than the size of the A4 document, so you'll need to hold down Alt and Shift on your keyboard and just resize it so it's a little bit bigger than your canvas. And press the tick at the top of the page. Now to blend this crumpled paper in with the background, all you need to do is just come over to your layers box here, and where you've got the normal blend mode selected, change that to multiply, and that will blend that crumpled paper in with our background, and that looks really good now. So I'm happy with that background. So what I want to do is tidy these layers up. Okay, and I'm going to highlight both of these layers simply by holding down Shift and clicking on them both. With both layers highlighted, I'm going to drag them down to a little folder at the bottom, and that will group them together into a folder, which you can expand and still see each individual layer. Okay, so I'm going to change it from Group 1, and I'm just going to call it Background. I'm going to hit the padlock to lock that into position. Okay, so that's our nice dark background all finished. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in some coffee beans for the center piece of our document. That's the main part of our poster. So I'm going to go up to File again, and I'm going to Place Embedded. Okay, and this time I'm going to bring in a little file that says coffee beans. And that brings in some coffee beans and a coffee cup. Hold down Shift and Alt at the same time and just resize that for me until you get somewhere around that size. Press the tick at the top once you're happy with it. We're also going to go back to File and Place Embedded one more time. This time we're going to bring in the coffee. And just move the coffee out of the way. You can either move it up or down a little bit. You can make it a wee bit smaller if you want. Press the tick at the top just to place it in. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to cut out the liquid from this coffee cup here and put it on top of the coffee beans on this coffee cup here. Okay, sounds a little bit confusing. That's pretty simple. So I'm going to grab my magnifying glass or my zoom tool and just click and drag towards my coffee mug up here. I'm going to use my elliptical marquee tool. So that's the second tool down over here. It's probably on the rectangular marquee tool for you at the moment, but if you hold your mouse down on it, you can select the elliptical marquee tool. And it's going to allow you to make a circle selection. What we're going to do is we're going to start somewhere around this center point here. Okay, where my mouse is now. And I'm going to hold Shift and click and drag out an elliptical marquee. Now you want to come down till we're over the top of that liquid, and it's going to finish about there. Okay, and you can pick this up now and move it on top of the liquid. It should be just a little bit bigger on every side, like mine is. Okay, so if you didn't get yours looking just like that, that's a perfect selection around that liquid. Press Ctrl D to deselect, and that'll get rid of those little marching ants. And you can have another go at getting your elliptical marquee tool the same as mine. Now once you've got this selection made, what we're going to do is apply a layer mask. And what that's going to do is simply hide everything outside of that selection on that layer. You'll see what I mean when I come over to my layer panel here and go down the bottom and click on this little button that has a rectangle with a circle cut out of the middle of it. Okay, that applies the layer mask, and all that's left is our selection. Using your Move tool now, you can pick that up and drag it down on top of the coffee. Okay, it's still a little bit big, so I'm going to hold Alt and Shift and just resize it a little bit. You want it still to cover all of those beans. Still a little bit big. Zoom in here and use my arrow keys to give it a bit of a nudge. And that's looking pretty good. So I'll press the tick at the top once I'm happy with that. Okay, so what we can do now is just tidy up the edges of the coffee here. Okay, they look a little bit messy with some of that mug from up the top still selected. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our eraser tool to just smooth out those edges. So you'll find your eraser tool over in the toolbox just here. Press the letter E to pick it up for a shortcut. Now with your eraser selected, head up the top and have a look at your brushes. Okay, you want to choose a nice soft brush. The hardness needs to be 50%. So mine was on 0 then, so I will have to change to 50%. Size, don't worry about it right now. We're going to adjust it in a moment. Okay. What we're going to do next is just zoom in a little bit here. And we're going to go over and we're going to click on our layer mask. So this black section over here. Okay, with my eraser now, I'm just going to drop the size of my brush by pressing the square brackets a couple of times, and you should see if you press the left square bracket, that's next to the letter P on your keyboard, your brush size drop a little bit in size. You can now just go around very carefully and start rubbing around the edges of the coffee. You have to do this very carefully. It's quite tricky with the mouse, so just do little bits at a time. And if you stuff it up, press Ctrl Z to undo it. Yeah, there's a little stuff up there. Don't worry if you see some coffee beans come through underneath like I'm seeing just here. Okay, we'll resize it and fix it all up in just a moment and reposition it. So this is one of the time consuming parts because you do have to go slow to make this look good. You can see it's looking a bit dark and a bit ugly here, but that's okay. We will fix that shortly. Just make sure it's a neat and smooth erasing job. Try not to do it in one hit either, just do little bits here and there. That way if you make a mistake you have to undo a little bit. Alright, so not the best job, it's alright. I'll grab my move tool now and I'll just stretch him out a little bit. Nudge it around with my arrow keys until I'm fairly happy with it. Press the tick at the top. Alright, you can zoom out a little bit now. Yeah, it's not too bad. Yeah, probably not the best job. Hopefully yours looks a bit better than mine. But when you zoom out at full size, it's not going to look too bad. Okay, it'll look something like that. Again, you may just have to give it a little bit of a nudge around just to get it looking good. There we go. That'll do me for now. That looks realistic enough. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is we're going to select both these layers, so the coffee and the coffee beans. Once they're both selected, just right click on them, and we're also going to convert these to a smart object. Okay, from here we can start applying some effects to the coffee. So zooming in, we're going to put a drop shadow behind these to make it look like it's sitting on this background. Okay, at the moment it kind of looks like the coffee beans are just floating in the air. So if we pop over to our layer where it says coffee, double click in the empty space next to it, your layer styles will come up, and you'll see right at the bottom you've got an option for a drop shadow. And already that's looking much better. If I check this preview box on and off, just watch the edges of those coffee beans. Zoom in a bit there so you can see them. Okay, you can see the little drop shadow appear underneath them to make them look like they're sitting on the background. Okay, so the things you need for your drop shadow is normal blend mode, 100% opacity. We need a 90-degree angle. The distance should be 13 pixels. Spread is 0. And 14 pixels for the size. If you get those settings, it should look something similar to mine when you preview or toggle the preview on and off. Alright, so press OK once you've got that drop shadow in, and that definitely makes it look more like it's sitting on our background now, not just floating in the air. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to select our coffee layer over here, and then we're going to look for our adjustments panel. In your adjustments panel, we want to adjust the levels. Okay, and the levels is this little graph here next to that sun. Basically, if you hover over it, you'll see the word levels appear. So just click on that for me. And when you see the word levels appear and this little dialog box comes up, hit this button here. Okay, that means it's only going to apply the effect to the layer below it, which is the coffee beans. It's not going to touch the background. And what we need to do is we need to change this first lever here, bring it down until the little box says 20. Alright, once you've done that, just close the properties off. And if you want to see what that did, hit the little eye here. And you can see it's quite bright there, those coffee beans, but when we turn the levels back on, you can see that it just makes them a little bit darker. Alright, next thing we're going to do is going to change the color balance of this layer. Okay, so we're just going to go up and select these little scales, and the color balance options will come up. What we want to change here is the first box red to around the number 17. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. 18 is fine. Magenta, which is the next one, we're going to swing it to the left and bring it down to about -10-ish. And we want to change the blue to 38. Now, you can see at the moment that's affecting my entire document. So again, press this little button here with the arrow pointing down out of the square, and that will just apply it to the coffee beans layer, so that layer below it. Alright, so you can just close those properties off. If you want to see what that color balance did, just toggle your little visibility switch here. And you can see it went from a fairly warmish yellow kind of color. We just cooled it down a bit, added a few reds to it, and it looks a lot better, I reckon. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to just add a little bit of steam that comes out of this coffee cup. Okay, so the way we're going to do that is we're going to make a new layer first of all over here. So next to your trash can, you've got this little piece of paper with a folder corner. If you just click on that, it adds a new layer. I'm going to rename that layer to steam. Now we're going to use brushes to paint some steam coming out of this coffee cup. And what I've done is I've gone online and I've actually downloaded some brushes that look like smoke. So they're called smoke brushes. What we need to do in Photoshop is select our brush tool. Looks like a little paintbrush. Head up the top to where we can select our brushes, and yours might look a little bit different to mine, but you've got different brushes that you can select. So nice soft brushes or hard brushes. You might have some other different types of brushes there that look more like paint. Alright, what we're going to do though is bring in those smoke brushes I talked about. So you hit the little hit the little cog on the right hand side, and I want you to head down to import brushes. From here, just need to navigate to your breakfast flyer folder, and you'll see that you've got these smoke brushes that you can import. So load them in, and they appear at the bottom of your list. I'm just going to expand this folder, and you should see some brushes that look like this. Okay, it's all different types of smoke. And that's basically going to look like steam once we paint them in. So I want you to pick some steam going into this document here. Don't pick these big ones like this one here or this one down here that kind of get cut off on the corners. You just want some skinny bits of steam. So the ones towards the top look a bit better, I think. I might try this one here. You want to make sure you've got the color white down here and simply click on your document. That adds a little bit of steam coming out of the page. Now that's probably a little bit too big, so I'm going to undo that. Use my square brackets again. So next to the letter P, you've got your square brackets. Left one makes them smaller, right one makes them bigger. And just add a little bit of steam coming out of your coffee cup. You'll have to choose a few different brushes to get it looking good. Change their sizes a little bit. So far so good. I might just add one more coming out of the middle. Don't be too fussy with what you pick. Something like that. Alrighty, so now it looks like I've got some steam coming out of my coffee when it's actually just some smoky brushes painted on top. Okay, so that's looking good as well. So what we might do now is tidy up our layers over here by selecting the steam layer and the coffee layer and the two adjustments in between. So just hold down Shift to select those four things. Drag them down the bottom to the folder, and that will group them together into a folder. I just want you to call it coffee. Okay, so that's our centerpiece done for our document. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to start to bring in some food that goes around the outside of our flyer. If we look at the finished document, we've got some croissants, some muffins, pancake, and some fruit. Okay, so it's time to start selecting them and bringing them in. First thing you want to do is go to File and Open, and I want you to open up the Healthy Breakfast image. When you open it up, you've got a few things here that we are going to select. First thing we're going to select is the croissants. Okay, so this one just here. The way we're going to select it is with the Quick Selection tool. Okay, so here's your Quick Selection tool. Make sure you've got the plus sign selected up the top, and just click and drag over the croissants. Okay, make sure you zoom in a bit and make sure that you've got as much of that selected as possible. Don't worry about the little green thing at the bottom there. If you select a bit of that, that's fine. That's from the cherries on the plate next to it. We'll get rid of them later. Just be careful up the top there because it does select a little bit too much. So you'll have to grab your minus brush here to deselect some and use your square brackets to make your brush nice and small and just deselect where it's gone onto the table up the top there. Okay, so that looks a bit better. So that looks like a pretty good selection to me. But just to confirm that's a good selection, what we're going to do is we're going to go up the top to Select and Mask. Now from here, it's just going to block out everything that isn't selected and just show you your selection. And that confirms that that looks pretty good for what I want. But there is a few little edges on that plate that don't look too crash hot. So what I'm going to do is apply with some of these settings on the right hand side. Okay, first one is feather. Feather just smooths out the edges, it slightly blurs the edges, and if I put in 5 pixels for that, you'll see the edges slightly become blurred. Next thing I'm going to do is change the contrast to 65%. That just sharpens up the edges a bit more now, and I'm going to shift the edge by -25. Okay, so that just makes the selection come in a bit tighter around our plate. And that's made a pretty clean cut now. So what I'm going to do is just down the bottom where you've got output settings, I want you to change where it says output to selection. I want you to change it to a new layer. So this selection now will pop up on a new layer. Click OK. You'll see a new layer appears. It's called background copy, but you can delete that and just write in croissants. Alright, you can hide that croissants layer now and make your background come back. What we're going to do now is the same thing, but just for the fruit over here. So zooming in on the plate of fruit, we'll use our quick selection tool again, making sure that we've got the little plus sign selected. I'll make my brush a bit bigger by pressing the right square bracket, and I'm just going to select that plate of fruit. Okay, do a rough cut first. Oops, I'm on the wrong layer. Make sure you've got your background layer selected or that's not going to work. Now that looks pretty good. It's gone around the oranges okay. Don't worry about the fork too much. Okay, we're going to chop him out anyway, so don't stress there. Make sure you've got all the fruit in the middle selected. All's looking good except for the cherries. Okay, so I'm just going to have to zoom in here and make my brush really small and go and select those green cherries, or the green stem on the cherries. Okay, might have to be a little bit fussy, make that brush nice and small. Something like that. Pretty good. Now this brown section in here has been selected, so we need to get the minus brush up the top and just deselect that little bit of brown in there. Make sure your brush is really small. You may need to flick it back over to the plus brush again just to select a little bit more, but something like that. It's looking pretty good. So zooming out now, I'm going to click Select and Mask just to confirm that I've made a clean selection. Okay, so far it looks pretty good. We'll zoom in a bit here and we'll have a closer look. Yep, that looks pretty good, but as I said before, there's a bit of an edge on this plate that we might fix up, so we're going to do similar settings to what we did before. So I'm going to change the feather to 5 pixels, contrast to 65, and the shift edge to -25%. Okay, once you've got those 3 settings put in, down in the output settings, make sure you output to a new layer. That's going to put this selection onto a new layer for us. Click OK and zoom out a bit. You can see we've got now a background copy layer that's come in. We'll rename that to fruit. Press enter. We're going to hide it and just make the background reappear. Alrighty. So actually I don't need anything more from this one, so I'm going to hide that background layer actually and bring back my fruit and my croissants. Using my move tool at the top here, I'm just going to pick up the fruit and I'm going to drag it over to my poster and drop it on. Okay, I'm going to do the same for the croissants. So back over here, use your move tool, pick up your croissants, drag it over to your poster, drop it in. Now you want the croissants up in the top left and this fruit down the top, bottom left. Okay, and what we're going to do using this move tool is ensure that show transform controls is turned on, so you get the bounding box around these. And you can hold Alt and Shift and just resize them. Remember the croissants had that little stem of a cherry sitting in that corner, so we're just going to hold Shift and give that a bit of a rotate so it's off the page. I might put my croissants, well, let's say about there. Press the tick at the top. Now I need to make my fruit a similar size, so I'm just going to bring it down. Oh, it's roughly about the same size. And it doesn't really need to rotate this one. Okay, so I might just bring it up a little bit more so you can see that fork a bit clearer. Don't cut off too much of the fruit. Something about there looks good. So I can press the tick at the top, and we've now got 2 plates looking good. Now this video has been running for about 25 minutes, so what I might do is I might just stop there and give you guys a bit of a break. We're going to come back shortly and put in the rest of the food and just put a bit of text in and a few final color adjustments, and we'll be done. So I'll catch you in the next part of the video.